in the pending global reset. Left brain jobs will be wiped out by Google, robots, and outsourcing. The antidote is the unoutsourceable superpower of the flow state. Welcome to What the Flow, where we discuss making money easier, connecting deeper, and creating your own luck. And WTF, why we numb out, sabotage, and play small, and how to change it. It's Flow Time with Tony.
WTF. Welcome, What the Flow podcast. This is Tony Lester. Really excited that you have joined me today. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about something I think is really important to get out right away before we get any further into this discussion about the flow state. It's the myths and lies of the flow state, the misconceptions, the unrealistic expectations that bring suffering and that actually keep you and other people from experiencing the flow state more and more often in your life. And so that's what we're going to talk about in this episode. And the reason this is important is because if you have some kind of unrealistic expectation, then you're going to punish yourself along the way and you'll shame yourself along the way. And you'll miss out on all of these opportunities for actually experiencing moments of flow. And I really want to stress that, this idea of the flow state. It's why I talk about the other WTF stuff, because that's also part of the game. It's also part of the flow state, is when shit happens and it doesn't work out for us and life doesn't turn out the way that we want it to. What do we do in those instances? And so I run into a lot of people that will, they'll have some expectation that they go, I'm down on myself because I'm not always in the flow state. I had this one woman in one of my seminars that she was like, I can't accept myself because I don't always like being with my kids. And I'm like, what? I'm like, raise your hands if anybody has kids in the room. Is there anybody that sometimes doesn't like being with their kids? Do you still love your kids? And she was like, well, I hate making lunches for them, and I have to make lunches for them every day, and it's like the worst 15 minutes of my day or whatever it was. And I was like, what kind of expectation is that? And some other guy was in the room and he goes, well, I don't feel good about myself because all of my business ideas don't turn out. Like some of my business ideas are really bad and they fail. And I'm like, what? Like, what kind of expectation have you had on yourself that you're going to go into business and that every idea you have is going to work? That is just madness and insanity. And so what happens is when you have a realistic expectation is you can more often get into a flow state. And the more often you get into a flow state, the more you train your brain that that's a welcomed state, that's something that becomes easier and easier and easier over time. And you begin to develop a form of radical intuition, an ability to sense what move is the right move step by step by step as you move forward in your life. And this is critically important as we move into the future, and that change is going to be happening so much faster than humanity's ever seen. We have to have this skill, this ability to navigate uncertainty with calmness. Now, I'm not going to suggest that we're going to stay in a state of calmness all the time. That's ridiculous. I've been talking about this. I'm at a park near my parents' house. I'm staying in their basement because my family had a business sort of ripped out from under them this several days ago. And I'm here to help them start up a new business and get it going. And really just as a volunteer thing is like, this is what I do for my family. This is what we do for our tribe. And when my business failed 10, 12 years ago, they were there for me. And when other people have had crises, we come together. It's what we do. It's what we choose to do as a tribe for each other. And to think that in the rebuilding of a business and in the lawsuits that are happening and in the accusations and the threats and in the complete uncertainty, it was about a dozen people lost their jobs. And here's this whole group of people that are basically unemployed going, oh shit, what are we going to do? Like the idea that in that kind of uncertainty and putting in 15, 16, 20-hour days, going until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, day after day after day, this really starts to grind on a human being. It really starts to wear people down, and they start to get into some negative emotional states and some doubt and some uncertainty and some friction and all those different things. And so if we don't have this ability to tap back into the flow state, life is going to beat us down. And when we have this, we can recharge on a regular basis. We can step away and we can get certainty and clarity, and we know what step to take next. Like this whole thing of flow. I was talking to a couple of people about this when I was starting the podcast, and they're like, it kind of sounded like a yoga class, like, breathe in, breathe out. And I love yoga, it's great, but this is not about yoga. This is about getting shit done and doing it effectively and doing it predictably over and over and over again in your life. So anyway, with that said, today's episode is about the myths and lies of the flow state. The first one I want to talk about is this myth that this flow state is unpredictable. So contemplate this in your life. Think about the times when you've been in a place of like clarity, or maybe you had like some creative activity that you got into and you just had so much centeredness in you, or ideas just started flowing to you, or something came to you in that space. Most of us have experiences. If you haven't, then stick around. I'm going to teach you how to do this predictably. But often what happens is someone will have that happen. Like, I've worked with several artists, musicians, and creative people. And the same thing with business owners, because they have to come up with new ideas, and they have to come up with marketing ideas, and they have to solve problems. Or the executives that I've worked with, where they have these incredibly grinding long schedules, and they have to figure out what to do next for the business and get stuff done, right? So in this world of parenting, I have 5 children, and there's this need for an intuitive awareness of what each child needs, from the little children to the my adult children that one of them has moved out of the house. Having that ability to know what answer to give them is critically important. And so there's this idea that often people say, well, I just can't get into that state, or I experienced that one time, or that they need drugs or alcohol or some kind of substance to do that. I'll talk about that in just a little bit. What I experienced with these musicians, I started to kind of experiment with this about 12 years ago, and I wanted to identify what were the markers that they had in place. What were the core components of the experience that they had when they had been in a creative burst, or like in the zone, in the flow. And so I would start to work with a musician. I would say, okay, let's look at a time that you got into the flow. What did you do the day before? What time did you go to bed? What did you do before you went to bed? What did you do when you woke up in the morning? What did you eat? What did you not eat? What kind of music did you listen to? What was your circumstance? Looks like I've got a visitor, so this is going to be a walking podcast. What were you doing? This is the fun of doing a podcast that is not in a studio, which I'm gonna try and do as often as I can, because I don't like being in studio. But what did you do during those times when you had that clarity and that certainty? And we would start to recreate their creative moments. And I remember this one artist, and she would, and one of the big factors is scheduling it. I think it's very, very, very important that you actually schedule your creativity. And so this one artist that I'd worked with, I'd helped her create a CD, and she'd been able to get in the flow state a bunch of times over and over and over, created this really cool album. And then she hired me again, 2 years later. She's like, hey, I want to do this. And we built structure around flow state. And she would actually schedule it. She would get babysitters. She would do it away from her house. So she had a little office space that she would go to. And she would go to the space at a certain time of the day when it was her most alive time of the day, this is one of the factors. So write these things down for yourself. Identify for yourself what has gotten you in the flow state in the past. And then recreate this. But there was this one time when she called me up, and she was super frustrated. It's like 10 o'clock in the morning. She's like, I'm here at my office. I had a babysitter for my kids. I slept well last night. I ate the food that I eat when I'm going to do my flow state. I listen to the music that gets me inspired. And I'm here, and I'm trying to write music, and I can't write anything. There's nothing coming. And I'm beating myself up because I'm like using my family's resources, and I'm not even creating anything. And so in that case, I said to her, just close your eyes and get present to what would feel really alive to you today? And she thought about it. She says, I'd like to go. She's really kind of like an eccentric dresser, the way that she likes to dress. And she says there's this clothing store downtown that has the like most extreme eccentric dresses that like they're like left over from plays and performances and all these like different things. She's like, I would just love to go and try on dresses and like twirl around in the mirror. That would feel alive to me. That would feel inspiring to me. That would feel good to me. And so I'm like, okay, that's your assignment today. She goes, yeah, but that's not creating music. And I'm like, no, that's not what this is about. It's about tapping into alignment with what you need and listening to your intuition. So she did, and she went and tried on dresses. And then the next day she came back into the studio refreshed and wrote a song. So this is something that can be predictable, and I'll teach you as we go through this, the course, and if you some of the advanced programs that I have for those of you that really want to tap this radical intuition and this creativity to take your game to the next level. I'll actually handhold you and step by step take you through the process of predictably getting into this flow state. I was about to say every day. that is not true for me. I am not able to get into the flow state every day, but I am able to get into the flow state on a predictable basis. So I don't want to set like an unrealistic expectation. The next one is that this myth that it feels radically different than ordinary life. And there's kind of this idea that I always had as an entrepreneur that at the next level of my business, life was going to feel radically different. My body was going to feel radically different if I had X number of dollars in the bank, or I thought when I was a teenager, like, man, if I can just have sex, then life is going to feel radically different. Like everything's going to be so incredible, and I think sex is a magnificent experience as a human being. And then when that activity's over, life kind of just feels like life, right? It just feels like ordinary life. And so one of the misconceptions is that if we start operating from a flow state, that life's going to feel different. And in the moments of flow, there's a heightened sense of awareness. There's a greater clarity. There's the example I give, because it's contrasting this with feeling drunk or high. And, I went to a football game last night, and I had a couple of beers, and it was, I laughed and I had a great time and it was fun, which is a different feeling than the flow state. There's almost a sort of a disassociation when we use substances versus an alignment and a connectedness to self from the state of flow. And if you could compare it to, it's kind of like a heightened state of awareness, almost a level of being turned on or being aroused a little bit versus orgasmic, right? The flow state is not some like incredibly explosive experience like when someone gets high. Looks like I got something coming up around that. Anytime a speaker has things come up in their voice and then in their throat when they're talking about a subject, then they have something that they have to clear around that. So I have to clear something around sex and being high. Something came up for me. We'll talk about that on another podcast. But it's if we have this expectation that it's going to be so explosive and so amazing and so mind-blowing, then we're going to get let down most of the time. And that's really not what this flow state and this creative state is about. So again, having that realistic expectation is very, very important. Another misconception is when people say, well, I have too much chatter inside me. I have too much noise inside me to get into the flow state. And I'm going to have you consider that the people that have the greatest amount of chatter are those that will benefit the most from the flow state. And that the flow state is not going to eliminate chatter. It's going to channel the chatter. And it's going to help us channel it for little bursts of time, little windows of time. And the idea, and this is the next myth, is this idea that I can stay in this flow state forever, right? That I can get into flow and I can stay in flow. It's this idea that we can stay high forever, or that we can stay turned on forever, or that we can feel in love forever. It's this, we all want that. It feels amazing. It's just not realistic. And so the idea of the flow state is not to stay in flow all day long. Like yesterday, I'd been at this for almost a week with my family's business, And I was just like hitting the wall. I was feeling horrible. My head was foggy. I was just like, just couldn't get myself to do anymore. And I ended up, so one of the things after I had this brain injury is I'll have to do what's called a brain break, which I'll go lay underneath a pillow for 20 minutes. Just put a pillow on my head. And it resets my brain. And I took 8 brain breaks yesterday. And I ended up going on 4 bike rides. Bike rides are a way that I get like reset myself. And I did this over and over and over throughout the day to see if I could get another little burst of the flow state, right? So it's not this idea that I could stay in flow for 15 hours straight. No, I could get in and I could have these bursts of that clarity and bursts of the intuition and focus and get something done and then hit that wall and then know the tools to go hit the reset button. And so to have a realistic expectation for yourself that you're not going to stay in this flow state forever. You're going to hopefully tap into it early in the morning as a ritual, as a habit, as a way of addicting yourself to tapping into that flow state and then being able to predictably go back to it when you need that clarity. And then throughout your day, when you hit the wall, when you get burned out, when you get tired, when your body starts craving the carbs and the sugars and the caffeine and the Adderall and the substances and all those different things that happen when we get out of alignment, when we get too tired, then you have a way to get yourself back into alignment, back into connection with self, back into a flow state and a place of clarity. And you can do this over and over and over, predictably throughout the day. And then sometimes you won't be able to get there. Right, that's one of this idea. There are some days that I just flat out cannot get there. That either there's so much stress, or there's so much uncertainty, and I'm experiencing like crazy anxiety or fear, or there's just like this toxic inner stuff that happens, or there's conflict in my relationship that is just like so much noise inside me that I just can't find that flow state. And allowing that to be what is, not making that wrong, not beating ourselves up and going, well, today I don't feel well, therefore there's something wrong with me. Just accepting that sometimes we're not going to be able to get there. And that's okay. But if we take the steps on a regular basis, we can get there on a regular basis. Another myth is that there isn't a shadow side to this process. That people think that they're going to start to get into the flow state and they're not going to have to deal with their shadow side, that they're not going to have to deal with the sabotage patterns that we have as a human being. And this is just completely ridiculous. The nature of the brain is to keep us where we are. Change is dangerous to the brain. The brain is going to do everything it can. I'll do a podcast on this, on the brain science of flow and what it means to get into this state. But the nature of the brain is to avoid change. Change is dangerous, and that's why this skill is so critically important for us now. Because change is happening, and it's going to keep happening, and it's going to keep happening faster and faster and faster. And this is not something that we are wired up for on an evolutionary standpoint. So we have to become dynamic in our ability to rewrite our story and to change and adapt with change and to flow quickly with change, or we'll get crushed by that change. But there's a shadow side to this. There's this shadow that kicks in of a shame-based conversation, particularly when we have a hard time getting into the flow state and we're not tapping into it. And we're trying to find creativity. We're trying to find answers. We're trying to find solutions. I remember when my business had failed about maybe 12 years ago, and I'd gone from having made a couple $1 million to I was down to like $200, and I was in this, and I'd given my house back to the bank. I'd sold all the cars and the toys and houses, and I'd sold the furniture. I even sold the silverware. I got $15 for my silverware. So I was like trying to like scrap things together and figure something out. And I was trying to start a new business, and I had this experience of I was living in this little rental house in the backwoods of Virginia. And in the basement, there was like this laundry room basement thing, and it was like cement walls, and there were snake skins all along the rafters, like hundreds of big, long, 7-8 foot long snake skins that the snakes had molted in the basement and taken their, changed their skins or whatever. And, you turn on the pipes in the house. I went from like living in this beautiful new luxury house with a shower that had like 15 shower heads. We called it the car wash. We'd just roll the kids through it, turn on all 15 and just roll them through it, wash these kids, to this house where you turn on the water, the shower, and the pipes would be like bam, 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 banging in the wall. My office, this house didn't originally have a bathroom. It didn't originally have plumbing. And so they built kind of onto the porch. It turned it into a bathroom. So the bathroom, master bathroom, was this odd shaped rectangular room. It was actually a pretty big sized room. And so over on one side is a shower and a toilet. And then there's just like, I don't know, it was like a 10 by 8-foot section. It was just like this big rectangular area, and that was my office. And so as I started my new business, my office was in the bathroom, and the kids would come in, and I'd be on a phone call, and they'd come in, they were little, and they'd run in, they'd use the bathroom, and I'd be like, don't flush, don't flush, don't flush, don't. And they would flush the toilet. I'd have to mute the phone because I was working from the office or from the bathroom. But I got down to, I'd put everything into this new business, and I got down to where I had $200 left in this PayPal account, and that was it. And I didn't know what I was going to do. It cost us $125 a week to eat, and I knew my rent was going to come up in a few weeks, and I wasn't going to have rent money. And I had built a bunch of websites, and all my websites were going to get shut off. It was like 2 weeks from the end, and I get this notification on my phone, and it's this notification from PayPal, and it says transaction declined, Walmart, New York, $170, or it was like $474 or something. I'm like, what the hell is that? Like, New York? I'm not in New York. What's going on? And then I was like looking at it, and about 2 minutes later, another text came through, and it says, an email comes through, and it goes, transaction declined, Walmart, New York, $376. What is this? And then transaction New York declined, Walmart. It was like the number kept on coming down, $350 and $320, and it starts doing this. And I realized somebody has my card, and they're going to run these charge. And once they get down to that magic number of the last $200 that I had, I was screwed. And so I'm calling PayPal. I'm like, hey, can you guys just stop this transaction? They said, we can cancel your card, but we can't, and then I'll stop all transactions, and then we'll mail you a new one. And I said, well, how long is that going to take? And they said, it'll get you in 2 weeks. I'm like, what do I do? Like, I had to get this money. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to the grocery store. I'm going to take the money out on the ATM in cash, and then I'll cancel the card. I'll figure things out after that. So I run outside, and it's pouring rain. If you've ever been in Virginia, it rains it was coming down. And I jump in my car, and the battery was dead because it was kind of like going down. I didn't have the $90 for a battery. And I'm sitting there, I'm like pounding my head on the steering wheel. I'm just like, I just feel like life was imploding on me. And I had this little motorcycle, this little Honda trail bike, and I go and I jump on this little trail bike, and we lived on this dirt road. It's about a mile long next to the cemetery, and I'm going along on this dirt bike, and it's just, the back tires are just like slipping out in the mud, and I've got my feet down as I'm splashing along in this mud puddle, and I'm just screaming like God or the universe or whatever it is, and I'm like, what do you want from me? I had this moment that I don't know how to explain. I don't know what it means. I don't know what it was. And I'm not even going to try to build story around it. But I had this incredible experience of peacefulness. This peacefulness, it just was suddenly like I was in this cocoon. And I don't know what it was. I don't know what it means. I don't know what I believe about it. But I had the experience of it, and it was this incredible, peaceful feeling, and this thought that was in my head of, the little voice in my head is like, hey, I just want your heart. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. You could have asked before I lost everything. But I was in such peace. I just had this knowing that everything was fine. And I ride to the store, and I get the cash, and I buy some groceries, and I come back out, and the rain had stopped, and the road was steaming this incredible steam. And I rode back, and it was this flow. I was one with the road as I rode this motorcycle, and everything was completely calm and zen and peaceful. And I get back to the house, and my wife was freaking out. She's like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't understand. It's just gonna be fine. She's like, what do you mean it's gonna be fine? I'm like, I don't know, but I got food. I'm like, let's make food. We made dinner, and we played as a family, watched a movie. We just had this beautiful night. And I got up the next day, totally unsure what I was gonna do next. And I get a phone call in the morning And it was a former client. And they said, hey, you worked with this person in our office, and we really need them to finish this project, and they're totally in their head. Can you, I don't know if you have time in your schedule, but could you work with them and like help them like get over their block and what's going on? And they said, we still have your routing number. Why don't we just wire you some money today? We'll just deposit it in your account today. Can you start today? Well, how about we put $1,000 in your account and you get on the phone with them and start working with them? And I remember like the negotiator in me, I'm going to teach you this principle. I'm going to teach you about negotiation, but the negotiator in me was like, yeah, let me check my schedule. Hold on. And I put the phone down and cried a little bit and was like, oh! And I'm like, yeah, I think I can work with them this afternoon. They're like, great, here, we'll deposit the money. And that was like this kind of this reset in my world of learning to get back in touch with something in me, this radical intuition, this certainty, this calmness that I had gotten out of the flow state. And it was in like total chaos. It was in total self-sabotage. I'd burned my business to the ground. And I started to follow this intuition, started to get into this flow state and allow myself to trust the next step. And that was really kind of the restart of this process. But there is a shadow side to this. So we shame ourselves, and sometimes we can't get into the flow state, and sometimes we can't stay in the flow state, and sometimes we beat ourselves up for it. And that's just part of this journey. A couple other myths and lies I want to talk to you. One of them is this idea of that everything is just going to flow to you magically if you do this. And I believe, because I've witnessed this with thousands of people, that you will start to have synchronicities in your life as you get into this flow state. The right person, the right place, the right time. You'll think about someone and they'll call you, or you'll need something and that person will show up in your world with exactly what you need. And things start to come together. But you have to get off your ass and do something. I don't know. Maybe if I could figure out how to just like lay around and do nothing and just let this stuff come to me just by thinking about it and imagining it, I totally would do that. I just haven't figured that out. What I have figured out is how to get into this flow, get into alignment with those things, and allow them to show up in my life while I'm in massive action. And so as you do this, like, you're going to need to take the massive action. You got to do something. And that getting in this flow state is not something that just like happens to you. It's based on actions that you take. And I think it's critically important that you develop rituals, that we develop rituals in our life. Daily activities. For the nature of the brain, I'll talk about this on the Brain podcast, talking about the nature of changing the brain. But we need to do this like we need to eat food every day, or we need to breathe every day. We need to do our steps and our rituals of this flow, of getting into alignment with ourselves, of changing our way of thinking, of following the rules in the body, the natural laws of the body. There's a whole bunch of steps to this that can be simple steps, and you make them lifestyle, and then you become addicted to those, and then the flow state becomes a natural state for you. But it has to become rituals in your life. So I hope this was helpful for you to have a realistic approach to taking on the flow state in your life and to starting to create this as daily steps. And what I would invite you to do at the end of this podcast is take a look at what has been your recipe for flow. What have been the things that you've done to get into this flow state? The time you go to bed, what you do the night before, or time you wake up on the days that you're in flow, the food that you eat, the food that you don't eat, the way you move your body, the way you don't move your body. Do you take phone calls? Do you not take phone calls? Do you have media? Do you not have media? Do you have social media? Do you hide from those things? Are you in nature? Are you in a building? Are you in a house? Are you laying down? Are you on a bike? Like, there's all these different things that you have a recipe for getting into the flow state. And I want you to examine that and explore that so that you can start to recreate this on a regular basis. I look forward to talking to you on the next podcast. And in the meantime, create yourself a fantastic day.
If you're ready now to access the superpower of the flow state in your life, download the free mini course to learn the 3 easy steps of Tony's morning ritual. Now go and create some luck.